Good morning, and welcome back to another episode. I'm going to just remind myself quickly where we've gotten up to. So let's go just run the program. We've now got a game that sort of looks like a game, is playable. I think it has a score. We can slam pieces, and rotate pieces. Right, like it's starting to look and feel a bit like Tetris, so that's nice. It still looks like junk, right? It doesn't look like it's been thought through particularly, because it hasn't really. I've just stuck a grid off to the side. Have I plugged in my little drawing doodly what? Maybe it's worth. I have not. Alright, let's do a little sketch of what I'm thinking might be worth doing next. Do it with my mouse. So if you've got the screen, right? Currently, we just have a grid kind of at random. I think there's something to say that we want to know like what the width and what the height is. And we've got a way to set kind of what the minimums should be, so we can quite meaningfully pick some width that we're going to fix this here to, that we can guarantee will always fit on the screen. And we'll keep that a fixed width, which will say like your score. And it'll say whatever it says. And then underneath that, I think like next, right, we'll have like your piece down here. How we're going to show it, I'm not completely sure of yet. Presumably we want to include the point that you rotate around, but you know, we'll work that out. And you can imagine as we keep going, maybe we add like the ability to hold a piece, and that can go in here as well. Maybe there's a like menu button to get back to the main menu with your mouse. Like, you know, this kind of becomes the place we put controls, and then we put the grid in this side over here. And then I think we know, given that the grid has a certain width and height in cells, we want those cells to be square. So we know what ratio what's the right word for it? Like, kind of like the aspect ratio. Those are the wrong phrasing though. The like width to height ratio on our grid will be known, which means we can pick whether it will fill horizontally or vertically, and then just have it take up as much room as possible, and have like, you know, blank either side of it. And that way, as you change the screen size, it does whatever makes the most sense, I guess. Yeah, and I think if we get there, it'll look much more polished, right, than just a random grid. I'm not sure how much work there's going to be. I think we have all the nuts and bolts in place to make it reasonably doable, though. So, yeah, that is what we're going to aim for. With that in mind, let's do a quick check that nothing is unpushed. And then let's have a bit of a think. Where in our program do we have all that code? So, you'd have thought I'd remember this by now. We initialize everything, we get into our game loop, we update the game state, and process all of the player actions. I think it will be this populate entities that we're going to be updating. So, in what may be an over-engineered system, we have the game state, which is just kind of like an object that says what the game looks like currently. That's what all of our kind of like logic operates on. We have this kind of intermediate thing that I'm calling entities, which is about game objects, but they know their position on screen now. I'm trying to remember why that was useful. I think it might have been useful for mouse event handling. Like if I want you to be able to click on a thing, it needs to not just know like I'm a rectangle on the screen, it needs to know I'm a button with this callback. So we have an entities buffer we populate. Draw entities, takes those entities and creates what are called drawables, which is basically like puts rectangles with specific like textures in specific places, and then render actually sends it off to our pipeline to be drawn. So render will take drawables and create indices and vertices and actually put them on the screen. So I think we're in here. Is that too small to read? It might be. Let's go something like that. Right. So we're interested in our game. We get the game state. Yeah, and currently we just hard code grid pos, grid dim. Let me push this grid entity. Given a position and a dimensions. Has all this stuff off the game state. And it just works it out. Cool. So, what is an R to do? Draw fixed width panel. We draw a fixed width panel on the right. What should I call it? Like dynamic grid pos, grid dim. Kind of put the grid in the most sensible place. And to do, add score to right panel. Add next piece to right panel. That's our goal. So a fixed width panel on the right doesn't sound hard, does it? I think our... There we go. So we've set the min window width to 640. So maybe we make that like 480. So it'll always fit. Hopefully that's enough room that we can also write into it without it being too small. We can always change that though. How do we do grid entity then? We have a grid entity data, so maybe we end up making like a panel data. Yeah, let's go have a little look. How have we gone about doing this? Clickable on-click type data. Okay. Then we have functions that make those entities. We have an is hovered. That's just some checking. Okay. So maybe the thing to do is keep copying that pattern. So I'll call it like game panel. Which will give us back an entity. It will want a pos. It will want a dim. And later on, it will also get stuff like the score and the next piece and stuff. Each of these things. That is data. It's an entity with type grid. Yeah, I see. Then we must have something somewhere. This feels like it's all a bit involved, doesn't it? Maybe we can refactor this once we've got some more examples. So currently, game panel entity data is just nothing. Presumably means there's a switch somewhere that says how do I take those and make drawables from them. I think is probably what I've done with that. Right, so game panel looks like this. And for now, it's going to go entity pos equals pos dim equals dim. Type equals game panel. How about that? Right, so we're in here, and we can then do a entity push for our game panel. Me? That not exist? Am I mad? It does not exist. There we go. Take a pos and a dim. Not set pos and dim. God damn it. Okay. Let's go ahead and say panel pos will be equal to what? We must have the screen dimensions somewhere, because I think that was part of the thinking in all of this, is that I want to be able to grab screen dimensions. Where have I put it though? Our global context. There we go, global context surface extent. So yeah, we can grab screen dimensions. Our panel position is going to be our surface extent dot width minus panel width. Is that the right way to do this? Your U32 want it to end up an int, a float f32. So can I just go cast the result of that to an f32? Y is equal to 0. And panel dim be dim. You know what? Feels like we should just not do that. We should just do this. Height will be the whole screen. Right, and then this panel pos and panel dim. No problem, sir. Now those types don't make sense. That is a problem. You're a U32, you're an F32, so actually I want to do that one. Cool. So that now gives us a rectangle that just sits there and does nothing. Our drawables have like drawable from entity. Draw entities, that sounds like what we want. Excuse me? Am I stupid? It's an entity. An entity type. Entity type has game panel. Right, let's just see. Do this. We're not in the switch, that's why. Cool. You love just making dumb mistakes, don't you? So let's go ahead and say draw game panel. Give us an entity, And it will just draw a rectangle for now. Gonna make that rectangle bright green. What's your Z value? I guess you sit at the same Z value as this stuff. You should never overlap it, so that's fine. How about that? Shall we see how that looks? What am I doing? Recompile. Cool. Change the width. Just a fixed width. Cool. What are we gonna do? What draw game panel does this? Guess should we make it a nicer grey rather than atrocious green? That look more reasonable. Still pretty horrible, isn't it? We define dark grey. Jump to where I have to find my colours. .7? Maybe? Went the wrong way. Classic. Go with that. Assume the game will look more like that. Cool. That's our panel. And then we want to come back and find our not go do. To do. So we're drawing a fixed width panel. We now want to make our grid pos and dim not hard coded. But what do we want them to be? Oh. I'm not actually sure. I wonder where we've put all our constants about, like what the grid looks like. Piece count, grid width. We have these values. Is it fair to say that these will always have this same ratio? Probably not, right? Because we might well tweak these. These were kind of just pulled out of nowhere. Means probably the right thing to do is to get the ratio of the two. Okay, that's the thing. So we get the ratio of the two of them. And then we know it's going to be squares. So the question is, why am I struggling so hard? We're in here. So, our available space has got dimensions. Width will be the hard one. Height will just be our surface extent.height. Pass to a float. The width will be our surface extent dot width. I think these might actually be spelled out because I'm not consistent. Minus panel dim dot width. So that's the space that we have available to put the grid in. So if I say grid width to height is equal to make these floats so we don't get any like weird rounding. Right. Make that over so I remember. I guess grid 2. I'm not sure if I mean the same thing with that every time I say it. So grid width over height gives us this. Grid available space width over height is grid available space over grid available space or height. What does that tell us? If the available space width over height is bigger than the grid width over height, I'm going to have more room on the left and right, right? That's true. Can I just like for declare these so that they do exist, but we're going to set them additionally. Right, so we get into here and we go if grid width over height greater than grid available space width over height, then bars top and bottom, else bars left and right, or no bars if you get exactly the same. That sound right? I think so. What bars top and bottom means is grid fills width. And bars left and right means that the grid fills height. Right, because that makes our dim calculation defined. So grid dim becomes width is equal to cast. Is there any casting? I think there might be casting. Float, global context, surface extent, dot width, and then our height we get from the width. Hang on a second. Okay, width is equal to cast F32 global context surface extent dot width height be width over grid width over height. And then we can set that into grid dim. Maybe we even let grid pos stay 0, 0 for now. We check that this looks sensible. Width is width. Height is height. In this case, the height simply. Surface extent dot height. And we get the width is a multiply this time, right? Height times grid width over height. Grid dim. W is width, height is height. Grid pos should just be 0, 0, so that should. Okay. Do we blow up? Interesting. Okay, something's going wrong in that case. We never fill the actual screen width, do we? We should be using available space instead of this one. Width is equal to grid available space dot width. Should already be afloat. Might mean we don't even need this bit. Grid available space dot height. Gets too narrow, we just shrink. Beautiful. We might need to revisit our resizing logic because it is pretty nasty that I guess this was many videos ago. So what I've done is I've said I think there's a bunch of memory allocations when you change the screen size, and I wasn't sure if they were going to end up costing me somewhere. No, that's not true. There was something. I think we ended up like overrunning one of our like buffers in that kind of like entities to drawables to graphics primitives pipeline. And I didn't want to have to sit and work that out right away, so I've just made it so that if the screen size is changing, we just kind of short circuit everything until you finish, then we clear everything, and like the screen size needs to be stable for a couple of frames in a row before we actually attempt to render anything. It doesn't feel crazy, right? Like it's edge casey, but it is nasty looking. Okay. Which means we actually don't need this width value, right? So we can just come in here. We can take width and width. We can do that. And we can come in here, take height, and we can do that. That should also work. Nice. Alright, so now it's just the position to work out. So, if the grid screen fills the screen width, screen is it like available width, we need to work out how tall our bottom bar is. So unfilled height is equal to grid available space height minus height. Grid pos x is 0 because it's not displaced left to right. Y unfilled height 2 angry. Y angry. There we go. And in this case, what we have is unfilled width will be grid available space width minus actual width. Grid pos will be x equals unfilled width. Y0. Run U. We get nice top and bottom bars. Oh. Alright, so top and bottom's working, left, right isn't. Why? Because that needs to be over 2. Beautiful. Yeah, it's too small, and that's the worst case that we get. This, which is still broadly playable, it just looks a bit silly. Nice. I like that. Let's pop a quick commit in. That feels like we've done a thing. Game screen layout. Okay. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. What else is there to do? Add the score to the right panel. So, what are we doing? Game state already has a score on it, right? Come in here, like game state. There we go. It's an int. I want to pass that into here, I think. Game panel. Entity, I think we'll just take game state score. Score is an int. Data is equal to something. Just copy the I've done there. So then here I go. Data is equal to game panel entity data. And we need to go and add that score to here. So score. We do this, that should compile. Nice. Close that. Puts us now back in our drawable. Call it. Down here, we want to see draw game panel. Currently, we just draw a dumb rectangle. Okay. How do we work out where to put that? That doesn't sound hard, but I need a wee. I will be back in a second. Alrighty, what were we doing? Drawing the score. How do we work out where to put the score? I have a thing for drawstring that should be able to just draw a number. So I guess the easiest thing to do at first is just stick it in the bottom. Let's go ahead and say drawstring. Oh, string doesn't take a number. Maybe that's the first thing to do. Oh my god, what am I doing? Stick that down there. So, alright, proc. Looks like that. And I would like to. What would I like to do? That probably requires a memory allocation, doesn't it? To do what I'm about to do. Ugh. So what I'm thinking you could do is you could take n, you count how many digits you need, right? Then you make your string with that many digits, and then you draw string. That allocation feels painful. So I wonder if the actual thing to do is to say that we have a maximum number that we expect you will not get past. And make it stupid big, right? So draw game panel, num buffer 32. Right, so we can represent numbers up to 10 to the 32. And then our scores are accumulated in units of like 1,000, and therefore you just will never hit this. I call it character buffer, is that easier? Just have a bit of an issue though, right? We don't know from the jump how long our thing's going to be. We could write to the character buffer in reverse. Alright, so let's have a think. Digit count be the number of digits we've currently seen. Remember how to write Odin. That 0 initialized it. Let's go ahead and do car buffer size. I'm going to be referring to it in a minute. Sorry, let me put all this. We do want that draw number. So we'll put all this in. We just deleted because we're donkeys. Character buffer size. We can do it all on the stack this way, so there's no memory allocation. Let's do this little shadowing trick so it'll let us actually take the address of n and mutate the local version. 4. This logic will not work if n is equal to 0. Just do a 4. And we go. I only need just special handling if n is 0. Okay, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking we do. We go digit is equal to n modulo 10, n is equal to n over 10, right? and then we write digit into the back of that gets us our like smallest digit. Right, so if the number was 17, this gets us 7. We then go car buffer. At car buffer size -1 minus digit count equal to digit, but digit is just a number. We would like to turn it into the ASCII value, which we can get by adding the ASCII value of 0. Why is that angry? You're now a U8. Ah. Jesus Christ, what's going on? U8. Am I hitting U8? Must be hitting the uppercase function shortcut. That's silly. We do that, and then digit count plus equals 1. Right? If at this point if n is less than or equal to 0, break. If digit count r buffer size, then break. So if we were in the position that we're trying to draw a number that's just enormous, is that then safe? Car buffer size -1 minus digit count will give us a negative number and blows up. So we never try to write out of bounds that way. I guess again for safety we'd make it greater than or equal. In case future changes make that a possible case. Any value basically that would make this number negative just now bails, and so if it is full of 9s and you add one more, it just goes to all 0s. Cool. You know, we could probably use the size of int and pick values where that'll never happen, but I think this in practice never happens, so I think that's fine. We should always eventually hit this case, and we should then be able to say draw string. Oh, where did it start? Draw string. What am I doing? Car buffer. Am I going to want to be able to include 0s in this thing as well? I don't know. Maybe. Or some sort of like minimum length option. Okay. Drawstring takes character buffer. What does it do with that character buffer? It has to index into it. We want to go from car buffer size minus digit count to the end? No. Pos dim z. Yes. Does that sound right? So let's say we're writing the number 10. Means digit count will end up 2. Yeah. Makes digit count equal to 2. Drawstring, car buffer size minus digit count. Digit count is 2. Car buffer size is 32, so we get 30. The way this is written, we will write 30 and 31, which gives us 2 digits. So yeah, I think that sounds right. Let us try that. Have you, sir, draw the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 at entity pos entity dim. What underscore zs do we have? Something like that. Imagine you could type. Let's make the screen size a little bit less silly. Oh, beautiful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Right. One thing that's going to be a challenge is at the start of the game, your score is going to be tiny. And at the end of the game, your score, hopefully, if you are doing really well, is going to be enormous. And either one of those is going to end up looking silly if they take up the same amount of space. Well, I'm thinking a minimum length argument might be sensible. I think quite easy to do, right? So we can say in here, we pass in n-int, we'll say here min displayed digits, or min drawn digits, also be an int. I will say here min drawn digits hardless than our buffer size less than or equal. Because the way we're going to do that is our buffer is 0 initialized. So we can just tweak this, right? How do we want to do this? First digit index is equal to what will it be? I think it'll be the max of our buffer size. Okay, hang on. Let's say draw digit count. Will be equal to the max of digit count, min digit count, min drawn digits. Excuse me. Then instead of digit count in here, we have drawn digit count. Right, so if you pass in a number, okay, so let's pass in 1, 2, 3. Minimum drawn digits 2, we should see 1, 2, 3. Right. If minimum drawn digits is 5, we should see 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. Blows up. Interesting. Why blows up? Deconstruction. Drawn digit count. Five, 3, 5. Gets min drawn digits. Our buffer size is 32. Your problem. Our buffer size minus drawn digit count. Should be fine, shouldn't it? Because we've never drawn, never written anything into that buffer. This shouldn't be necessary, right? Because, yeah, it's not that. Is it because it's because it's actual zero values. It's not, yeah, they're not ASCII zero values. Oh, I hate that. So yeah, we probably do want something here for each character in car buffer. C equals that byte value. How annoying. But that then works. Right, and the size of that buffer is so small, that's probably essentially zero overhead. Okay, I'm going to go with that. And maybe we make it do something smarter later. But I think that works for what we're doing. So we can say something like 1,000,000 points is like a number that you'll generally be playing towards. So we set the value to look sensible at that point. And if your score goes higher than that, until your score hits 32 digits, which we're kind of banking on not happening, the digits will just kind of like squash in to make that drawable. Which feels like a nice solution. Right, so we're in here. So 1,000,000 would be 7 digits. And we can now say gamestate.score. No, sorry. Draw game panel. Entity.data. Oh, I forget how you cast in this language. Dot brackets. Dot brackets game panel data. Do something like that, and we can go data.score. About that. We probably want to put it somewhere that looks nicer, but let's have a look. So if we play the game now, big ugly sevens. Can I actually fill lines like this? Hey, and we get 5 points. So this should take us to 6. And it does. Beautiful. Are we having fun yet, chaps? Is it a game yet? I think we're getting there. Alright, so now we need to make the position and dimensions less silly. It might be sensible to give this panel like a margin, right? Like a margin all the way around to just nudge everything in by the same amount. So can I say here something like panel top bot margin will be some number 10 pixels, and panel left right will be some number. And then the score can have a width that's just kind of fixed. Let me go ahead and say something like score height. you just like panel width floating around somewhere. We can get it off here, can't we? So however wide it is, make it a fifth of that, maybe? And then entity pos. I want to push it right to the top, don't we? Dimensions are easy to think about. Dim is width is equal to entity dot dim dot width minus 2 times panel left right margin. Pos. It's going to take a little bit more thinking. So x can be equal to, it'll be entity.pos.x plus panel left right margin. And then we want it to be at the, let's just check that that's looking sensible left right. It fucking isn't. Okay. We gave it no height, that'll be why. There we go. Well, I'll do that then. Got a margin left right. We need to set the height, which is going to be at entity.dim.height. I guess we should do entity dot pos dot y. Right, so in case we ever moved this upwards, which we might add more UI in the bottom or something. We're going to put you at the top, which puts you at entity.dim.height. We want to come down by our top bottom margin. Then we want to come down by the score height. That gives us our bottom left position. Hey, beautiful. I think we might go for that. How do I even fill anything on this? And there. No, you're too wide like that. I need to make this bunch of pieces more sane. Okay. Fun. Where are my to-dos? I think while I'm here, I think I can get rid of this draw green rectangle, right? Because we're not actually showing that anywhere. You just expect to actually draw every cell. Cool. Let's go find, where are our to-dos? Add the next piece to the right panel. Just hopefully easy to do because we've not got too much. Well, we've got stuff about drawing a little grid. I don't know how reusable it is though. Let's go ahead and do a commit there and say draw game score. Because that feels like a nice little bit we've got done. Go. Right. How do we do this next piece stuff? I guess there's a bit of refactoring to make that possible, right? So at the minute, we don't actually know our next piece until we've grabbed for it, right? So I guess we need to refactor. So our game state will have active piece and next piece, so that this can know what it is. All right, let's go and have a look at that. I think that lives in here. You're in game. We want game state. Look at all that. Go ahead and add piece. Like so. Might stick it there. It's all well and good. It's currently not used. What are we going to do with it? Will be somewhere where we have our like update game, wherever that's ended up. Game update. I guess when we initialize the game, we're going to need to make that piece, aren't we? Currently, it's just uninitialized, so when you try to grab the first one, it'll just break. What are we doing? Game update. It has the ability to spawn a piece, which is where we're getting this random piece, which it grabs out of the piece buffer, like that. Basically, this will change to say game state.active piece is equal to game state.next piece, and next piece gets set to that. That won't work yet because next piece is initially not set to anything. So that blows up. Presumably, we must have an init function somewhere. There, we init game. We don't have an init function somewhere. We have an initial game state. Interesting. You see the problem. That next piece needs to be something. Where's this used? One thought is we can just make you a function, right? Like that. It will return this game state. But now you don't need to be known at compile time, so we can actually make you into whatever that down here was called. Oh, what was it doing? One update. Updated piece. Oh my god, we were literally just looking at it. It's called game update. What's so we're in here, and it's this chunk. Initial game. Oh, it's not got a piece buffer yet. Can't do that yet. Okay. Well, that sucks. Alright, maybe what we do, we undo all of this. We let it just be a known value like this, and then it's just a foot gun to remember. When you do this, game.state as a game state dot next piece. What done wrong? Expression is not used. Can I do that now? Okay. Um. Am I really just going to do it again? I think I am just going to do it again. Stop. Do the cast. What's the matter with you? Can't assign to it. Does it need to be a pointer? Come on, my guy. Is it something like that? No? Why is it so hard? Game state is equal to initial game state. Then we mutate that instead of doing all this nonsense. There we go. Game.screen is game. Game state is initial game state. We set next piece to some value. Start the game. That should hopefully work. Alright, that looks like it's working. We're getting pieces at least. We're getting random ones. So this was it's like a long thin. That was a square. Long thin. Right. I want to see it actually get the big one. There we go. So we are getting the full range of them. Beautiful. Work in progress. Next piece on game state. Grab our to do again. Cool. So we now have the next piece. We're gonna have to do a bit more nitty-gritty stuff. Yeah, hang on. Time's gonna jump. Gotta run. Alrighty. How much work is it going to be to add this next piece to the right panel? No, honestly, no. It should be similar to drawing grid. If what we do is we say we draw a 5x5 grid and just draw it on however it is that it looked in memory. I think it might make sense because I think it will be nice in the end for it to be able to show the rotation point as well. Okay. Where are we in here? Game. Just drawing the grid. Pushing the grid. Where's our panel? There, we push the panel. So I think the other thing to do then is just pass in next piece, right? And then this thing has all the info it needs. One second. Does feel a bad sign. Maybe this should just take a thing entity data argument rather than having to do all this repetition. Small fry. But now has next piece available. Let's go find where this is used because it'll be there that we care. Right. Maybe it makes sense to pull all of these positions and dimensions out. We're going to care about where each thing is. Right, because if we want to put next below the score, what we want to be able to say is, okay, now give me the score's position, and I'll take some amount off of it. Okay, hang on. So if we get the score height, do score was this, put score, I got a score pos in there. Can you imagine being able to type? There's a thing, isn't there? Is it? Oh, M. That's what I wanted. Look at me, learning my shortcuts. Score dim be equal to all of that guff, and this in here can every time score dim. Oops, I want to do that. I want it to do that. Score height, score pos, score dim. And then rounding the data off, we can do that right at the top. So we're going to probably do that in all of these. Draws that rect. That draws the score. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Right. Next piece is a 5x5 grid go ahead and say next piece. Pos something unknown currently. Next piece. Dim is something else. I think it's width. Will be the same as that, right? Like it's going to fill the available space. Height. I'll just fucking be something, right? Why have I pulled out score height into its own thing? Why don't I just make you there and do that there? Or pos. Reduce a bit of repetition. Just marginally. Something like that. Alright, so next piece. We're going to have the same thing again here, aren't we? Where we need to know the dimensions before we can know the position, because the height sets where the bottom left will be. Do we just want to make it as tall as it is wide? Right? It's a square. Right? Yes. Yeah, they are different. So we could do the same thing that we had for our grid. I've got a feeling though this one's going to stay a square forever. Come on then. Entity dim, 2 times panel. Left to right margin, that just sets the size, and then we'll just use it in both of these. Next piece, size. Something like that. Right, next piece pos. I think the move is, say it's going to be at score pos. Sorry. X is at entity pos X plus panel left right margin. Y is going to be at score pos Y minus. We just reuse the top bottom margin minus next piece dim dot height. Now we will draw a rect. Draw a red rectangle at next piece pos and next piece dim. Z is also UI text. Cool. Possibly slightly excessive because our panel's just really wide, but working. Right. Where am I doing draw grid? We make it reusable. Draw grid? No, because it hard codes grid width, grid height. If we just pass in grid width, grid height. No, because it takes the grid entity data as well. Aye. Aye. If I have grid pos, a grid dim. I think if I can pull this logic out into something I can reuse. So if I had something like draw, I don't know what you call it. Instead of taking in the entity, this is going to be the thing that does like this logic. That would be enough to work out my would that be enough to work out? So screen pause tells me where I'm going to put it on the screen. Grid dim lets me work out what cell dim would be. And then is any of this different? What it gets just needs that. What it sells? Currently just booleans. That's hard coded, but sorry. You give it that. Right, then this cell dim calculation looks similar, except it's screen dim. Looks like this, right? So then we'd have width is equal to screen dim over grid dim. Width passed to a float. Similar to height. Then currently this filled color and empty color business. Just temporary stuff for filled. Currently we need index in cells. I think being a little careful still because there's a bunch of hard-coded stuff in there. Instead of grid width, it's grid dim dot width, row index, grid dim dot width. Your problem. Mismatched types int verse I32. That fix. That gets us column index, gets us row index. Cell pos, I think is unchanged, right? Cell pos is equal to pos. Instead of entity pos, it'll be screen pos x plus cast f32 col index times cell dim width. Screen pos y plus cast f32 row index times cell dim h. Sorry, it's laborious because I'm doing it all again as a copy pasting, but I just don't want to get the wrong values. So like here, I think we probably want to pass in a z because it'll depend on what we're drawing. let's say for all this stuff, draw a rectangle. Filled color if filled, else empty color. Cell pos. Dim Z. Right? Then I think this business up here can just say my data is that. My value unchanged. If I just go draw grid cells, screen pos is entity dot dim grid dim width equals grid width height cells data dot cells and Z is that work? Then we can just bin all that. And that is then a reusable function that I think we can use for our next piece. Let's just check. Right, like that's looking fine. Good. Draw game panel. Now in here, instead of doing a draw rect, we would like to call this function. Right, draw that. Our screen pos is next piece pos. Our screen dim is next piece dim. This grid dim height is equal to piece height. Cells is the interesting one. Where we get that from? Piece. Data dot next piece dot build. I think. And then Z will pass in. Don't know what. Y text Z in that one. What you're there for. That work. Oh. Hey, boys. It's working. It looks ridiculous. But we're into like UX tweak rather than I don't know, gameplay issue, right? Sweet. So refactor grid drawing for reuse and draw next piece. Did I delete my to do? Now a to done. Re-enable when we got our selection. That is right. Unmerged into that. Yeah, I think that might be us done for now. Productive little relaxed sesh. There we go. Now, I do think it's probably worth saying this all feels a bit laborious. But I'm not sure yet if... Well, I'm fairly sure I'm going to want to do a bit of refactoring. So I think some stuff like having, like... What would be an example? Grid entity. It's obviously a good idea to have these little like helper functions so that I can say like draw me a grid entity rather than just having this chunk copy pasted around. Even if it's only used in one place, I think it just makes it readable, right? It makes it make more sense. It might have been an error to not just pass in this. Although now I'm looking at it, actually, this one has a bit more logic attached, so maybe that's why I decided to do it. It feels really sad in places like this, where if this list gets long, which it might, you're just pointlessly copying stuff. Oopsie daisy, what have I done? Put you back where you were. I didn't just blow everything up. Cool. So that's one thought is, I think there's a sort of a general tidying that has been on our to-do list for a while, that I'm putting off because it sounds boring. Apparently at some point I thought my click handling needed refactoring. I think that might just be a generic, everything needs a bit of a run over and a sense check. The UI code is quite laborious. I've not thought about it too hard. I'm really doing like the dumbest thing possible, right? Where I'm just kind of like, and then I get to the point where I want to draw the thing and I just think about it and I draw the thing. I don't know if we're going to have enough UI building in enough like dynamic situations where we're going to want to like write like a flexbox type system. I don't think so, right? I mean, so obviously there are options where you could put in a library for that. So I think it's called like Clay, as in like C lay, like layout. I think I've seen a lot of people mention is a nice library that does this very neatly. I don't know. I think for the same reason that I'm not using Unity, I kind of want to try and write all the things. This doesn't feel too bad yet. I think that the piece editor is where we're going to get to see if this is a terrible way to write a piece of UI, because it's going to have a lot of stuff on it. So I guess that's in the back of my mind, that might be worth doing. So it kind of, if I were at work, is that thing people like declarative? How do you say that word? Declarative style code, right? They would rather be able to just write and then give me, a thing and it's centered and it's here. Whereas really, if I want it centered, what I'm saying is, okay, well, I know where you are, I know where your parents are. I'm kind of manually doing that Flexbox maths. But hey, I'm still undecided about that. Because the other side to that is there's not that much UI to build. And so maybe we just do it. And I'll save worrying about this sort of thing for another day. / if I build a bigger game, I'll just pull in a library. Yeah. I don't know. Is where I'm getting at with that. This one will maybe stupid. This, I think if you read this through, it does vibe like Baby's First Code, right? It's very direct and to the point, but maybe that's fine, right? Maybe that's a good way to do a thing. So, who knows? We'll see. I do think this Make Prettier is a good place for us to go next, potentially. So currently our grid is all made up of true-false cells are either filled or not filled. I'd quite like to be able to have like a sprite sheet where you put in this is what the yellow block looks like, this is what the red block looks like. Maybe you have like a set of 8. And then when you make a piece, rather than it just being like a true or false, it has a color associated to each cell which says which sprite it's going to pull in. And I think it makes sense to do that before we do the level editor because it impacts how the level editor is going to have to work. So that's where I'm thinking. Maybe we make it 9. I think it might be nice to make it 9 and then have the level editor basically use like a grid of keys on your keyboard. So you can swap between them very effectively. That might be nice. But yeah. All to say, the stuff we're not doing today. There's plenty left to do, but we're making progress. It's looking nice. All right. It's been a fun one. I'll catch you next time.